Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by new Master Athletic Performance coach, Jaden Lacaria. Jaden, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, how's it going?
So I am number one, very excited to have Jaden on the podcast, but number two, very happy to have Jaden as part of Team Master Athletic Performance. Jaden and I met at Elite FTS when I was down visiting to do my podcast, kind of stayed in touch, had a few chats, had a really good conversation at the Arnold. And when I was looking for a new coach, to be honest, Jaden didn't really cross my mind because I thought he was kind of doing his own thing. But I reached out, had the conversation, and you decided ultimately that you wanted to be a part of the team after asking a ton of questions, which I loved. Um, I'm wondering, for a lot of the audience, knowing that most of our audience is coaches, what was that thought process for you deciding, hey, I'd much rather be part of a team than to try to go out on my own at this time?
Honestly, because I saw everything that you had already in play, like a lot of your systems, how you've already built out a good foundation, a team around your company, which stood out to me because you have people who already are pouring in and putting a lot of really useful information into one place, and that's something that I believe I can learn from. And there's a lot of people who are good in other areas that I may not be as good in. For example, you have more experience than me coaching, so you're already someone that I would look at as a mentor and someone that who's been there, done that I can learn from. So for me as a coach, there was a huge opportunity for me to learn and continue to grow, and that's just something I couldn't pass up on.
I'm glad you said that because I think a lot of people maybe shy away from joining up with a team because they think they have to do it all on their own. But I think on the flip side of that, I think a lot of teams are set up to not allow their coaches to flourish. And one of the things that is very important to me with our Master Athletic Performance team is it is a team, right? So Liv and I might be the owners of the company, but each one of you has an equal say to us in everything that we do. And we're putting you in positions to have the support you need to do all of the things within the industry that you want to do, and we're not taking very much money off the top from you to do it because we want to build the team. We don't necessarily care about generating revenue, which I think is the goal for most people in this industry who look to build teams. And I'll be the first one to tell you, if you're looking to build a team and you're adding coaches and you're taking 50% of their revenue, you can make a lot of money, but you're not putting that coach in a position, number one, to want to stay, and number two, to be able to be successful in their own right and earn a lot of money. I would, dude, if all of our coaches were making 20 grand a month, I'd be super happy.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in saying that, I don't want to come off as like, tooting our horn, but we at Master Athletic Performance with the 7 coaches that we have now, man, like we're the fucking best. And I'm not afraid to say it. And I love saying it because it makes me really proud. And you're a big piece of that. So thank you so much for joining the team. Fill in the people who are listening. Who are you? What have you done? Because, you don't, honestly, you don't tell people enough about the things that you've done and accomplished. So, you know, flex a little bit here.
All right. So I'll just go all the way back from where my lifting journey kind of began. I started lifting weights around 11 years old. That's when I started taking it really serious. So I started training with my stepdad. He was really into bodybuilding, so I grew up reading Flex magazine, muscular development, and I wanted to be like those guys. Well, also I was playing football at the time, playing baseball, so I wanted to focus on that. Started, putting everything towards football. The older I got, and the closer I got to high school, and then I went to college. Even before college, really, I was just so focused on training. That's all I really cared about. I was more worried about how my numbers would be in the gym after football practice. I was like, oh my gosh, my bench is going to suck. My squat's going to be bad. Like, those are the things that I was worried about during football practice. And I was very fortunate to have some really good powerlifters around me in high school and starting off. So that really kind of got me into the sport. And I was like, man, those guys are so strong. I started training at the local YMCA. And then, like I said, I went to college, started training. And that's where I was like, okay, do I want to focus on football still? Do I still want to pursue this 100%? And I was at West Virginia at the time, so the opportunity was like, okay, cool. I can go out, be a walk on. Like maybe by like third, fourth year, I can play. Make something for myself, or I can just be like, hey, okay, let's shift focus here and put everything towards bodybuilding and powerlifting. That's what I did. Did my first meet in 2018. Actually bombed out, and then
Me too. I bombed out
yeah,
my first meet. Twins.
yeah, it was so terrible. I bombed out, and then I picked a meet later that year. Did pretty good. It was USPA, like drug testing meet. And then after that, I had moved to Columbus to just finish my undergrad at Ohio State. So when I moved to Columbus, started training at Westside Barbell. And then from there, it's when I started, really getting, good in powerlifting. Got there at 19. Then my first year I was there, I mean, I was top 10 in the world, multiply 198. Then after there,
How did that conversation go? Like, was it just like, hey, I'm just going to show up at Westside? Because
so
we know that's not how it works.
no, no. So I actually had like a good friend of mine who had a few buddies that trained there, and they like put in word for me, and they just told me like, hey, just reach out, talk to Tom Barry. So reached out, got a hold of Tom, sent him an email, and was like, hey man, here's my numbers. This is how old I am. I live in Columbus. I love to train there. And I just remember it was like, all right, sounds good. Bring your best bench with you on Wednesday. And I just remember showing up there 7 a.m. And then anyone who's ever like who had ever been there or been to the location, it's like just a bunch of like storage warehouses kind of.
Yep.
And you pull up, and I'm like, man, am I in the right spot? And then everyone gets there, and I just gave everything I had, and it just went from there.
That's fucking cool, man. So, how long were you at Westside before you started training at Elite?
So I got there. So I was there all 2019, and then from there I left, went to Lexington Extreme, which is
Okay.
another powerlifting gym in Columbus area. So I trained there for on and off for probably like 3 years, 2 years. I say like 2 years. Yeah, I was there about 2 years. Um, and then after that, so when I blew my quads off, that's when I actually went to Elite. So
Okay.
yeah, I was just training at Lexington, a couple other gyms around Columbus area at the time. Then I tore both my quad tendons, um, and ended up at Elite. But prior to that, I did a raw meet. So after I left Westside, I started wanting to compete raw. Ended up totaling 1910 at 198, and that was like a 4 for 9 day. So it wasn't the best day for me.
That's a
Um,
pretty good 4 for 9 day, dude.
yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
not bad.
So I did that. Then my squat, it put me number two all time, which was 830 pounds at 198, and was a junior all time world record. So I was pretty pumped about that. And then from there, when my next meet I picked was the Ghost Clash, the second one. Right before then, I did a bodybuilding show, did North Americans. I got second place, so I was one spot away from turning pro. My first year ever competing in bodybuilding. So I was like,
Pretty
okay,
not
like,
bad, also. Yeah.
yeah. I was like, all right, like, I belong. I got what it takes. Just gotta, get back and get better. So I started training for the Ghost Clash, and that would have been my first meet ever in sleeves. So like, I was at Westside Multiply. I did a raw meet after Westside. It was in wraps, and then this would have been a sleeve meet. So I started training for that meet after North Americans in 2021 around October area. So it was like kind of a quick turnaround. And then the meet was in February at the time. So started training for that, and I was going to be my best meet to date for sure. And I was trying to break the sleeve all-time world record at 198, which was 80. It's still standing. It's 803, 804.
Chad did that?
No, Amir Speed. I think
Oh,
that's how you
God.
say his name.
Yep.
Yeah,
Amit Sapir.
yeah,
He holds the 242 and 220 world records, right? Or no, he doesn't hold the 220 world record anymore. Joe broke it,
yeah. Joe has it.
but
Yeah.
he holds the 242 Canadian record up here. But when I tell anyone that I'm going to go break that record, I tell them I'm going to break Jeremy's record because Amit Sapir's squat was miles high.
Really, I never
Oh,
saw
so
it.
bad. So bad.
Yeah, like his squat. I mean, that's a massive squat, 198, like that much. Um, there's a few guys now coming up like Jawan Garrison. I mean, he's going to be right there, probably break it next. At this point. Um, but yeah, so that's what happened essentially. I was going after that record. I squatted 771 in the gym, moved easy, and then I got sick with COVID. Didn't know I had COVID, just was sick, and I was like, oh, I'll push my squat back, like a few days, and I went to train, and then I took 759, moved easy, went 803, and then that's where I tore both my quad tendons.
I
So
never actually saw that video. Was it like a catastrophic, like drop the bar, like
yeah, so the
blow up?
video, it is a video. I didn't actually post it like on my social media, but it is on Larry Will's YouTube. We did like a collab, and that's like the only social media platform it's on, I think. Um, but yeah, like basically when I tore both, so I was with my buddy Aaron Palco. So like we were training.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Aaron was the one wrapping, or he was wrapping my knees, but he was there spotting me and helping me and stuff for that prep a little bit, and he was back spotting me, and I remember he just like. Um, He's like, I can feel like the jolt just go through your body, like when both your quads blew. It's like boom, boom, and it just sounded like a gun just went off.
Oh my
So
god.
I dumped the bar, like I was in the hole and I dumped it, and then I like flipped backwards over the bar.
Oh.
Yeah. So then I lay there and I was like, something doesn't feel right. And the only thing in my head was just like, I got a meet that's coming up. I need to get up and take this again. That's like
Yeah,
all
of
I thought
course.
about.
Naturally. And then
Yeah.
your legs wouldn't move.
Yeah. And then I'm just like scooting on the ground, trying to like figure out what's going on. Everyone's like, don't move, like freaking out. I'm like, guys, I'm fine. And then like it takes me like another like 30 seconds to realize like, okay, like I can't pick my legs up.
So you didn't have any pain.
No, it wasn't even pain. There was like no bruising either. It was just like my tendons detached entirely from both my kneecaps.
Oh, okay. So they
Yeah.
just detached from me. Okay, got it. Cool. Got it. Um, all right. So that brings up the question. That was in 2020, right?
2022.
2022. So we're 2 years removed.
Yeah.
Not barely.
Barely, yeah, 2 years, yeah.
And you're already under some big weights. You're already prepping for your second show since the surgery, right?
This will be my third because I had to requalify nationally. So like
Gotcha.
after North Americans in 2021, I mean, I did USA's also that year, right before uh, North Americans. Did those shows. So like I was qualified for like all of 2022. Obviously, I didn't compete, so I had to requalify the following year, which was last year. So I did the Ohio State Championships, won my class there. Then I went to national NPC National Championships in Texas. Did that show, got seventh. It just was a bad peak, so. Um, Now I've fixed all the problems that are the needed size, and then I'll be a middleweight again at North Americans.
So tell me a little bit about that mental process of starting back with the double quad rupture. Like what was going through your mind at that point? Because a lot of people going through injuries, a lot of like I know myself, I've been through a fucking assload of injuries. Um, someone that I know just recently tore both his quads off, decided he was going to retire from powerlifting. Obviously, you're young, but at the same time, you had a great amount of success leading up to that point. Was there ever any question in your mind that you would keep going?
No, I just knew I'd be back. Like that was just like that's all I believed in. Like there was never one for 1 second. Like if I didn't doubt any of it. Now I did ask myself a couple of times, like, okay, how long is this going to take? Because
Okay, that's a much different question. Yeah.
yeah, that's all I asked myself. And the biggest thing that I was worried about was like grad school at the time because I had just finished my undergrad at Ohio State in 2021, and then I pretty much went to that year and I was applying to different programs to get into for my master's in 2022. So I was trying to like weigh my options, see what schools I was getting into, what programs were accepting me. So when I blew my quads off, I'm like, dude, like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm getting accepted into these programs, and like, I'm stuck here in Columbus. Like, what if I can't even go to school? So I ended up enrolling in the Master of Sports Coaching program at Ohio State, which I finished at
Mhm.
end of last year. So in 2022, when I blew my quads off, that was like my main concern. And then luckily, um, by the time classes started, I was like healed essentially, uh, and was able just to go about like my day to day life. But I mean, that was such a strung out process because not only did I blow both my quads off, I had 5 surgeries that lasted six. That was a 6 month span.
Yeah, because you got a bunch of infections, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like when I blew them off, they're like, okay, well, you can't take the braces off for 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't an option. Like they're coming off before then. So I just remember I talked to Brian Dobson, owner of Metroflex Arlington in Dallas. He called me on the phone. We talked for a while because he tore one of his quads, and also he helped Branch Warren come back. And when the Arnold back to back years, once he
I remember that. Yeah.
when he blew his quad off, and I just remember talking to him, and then I also spoke to Branch as well. So like I got like their feedback and like what they did. And then I had well, actually one of my current clients right now. He blew both of his quads off before we started working together. So he kind of gave me like his feedback on what he did. And then I had a few other people I knew who had similar injuries as well in the sport. So I had a lot of people like really reach out and pour good information into me, especially about just rehab, like just making sure like things are recovering, like what to do, how to utilize certain supplements, and like making sure that I was like ahead of the schedule. But even like now when people reach out to me or talk to me about like their injuries or things they're going through when it's related to like mine, I'm like, dude, the number one thing you can do for yourself is to get full range of motion as soon as possible. Like get it's going to be uncomfortable, but get comfortable in those ranges of motions as soon as you can, because the quicker you get the range of motion back, the strength's going to come back, like the nerve reconnection is going to come back, and you'll just have a better quality of life. Because there's some hospitals with people that have these injuries, they'll keep them bedridden for 8 weeks and no range of motion at all. And then there's other people who, luckily, they'll get them up and moving like a day or two after surgery with a walker and stuff, like they did for me. The next day after my surgery, they had me up and moving. So like if they do that, from my perspective, to get you ahead. But kind of to go back to what you were saying, with my infections, after the first surgery, I had my braces off. I think it was like 4 weeks post op. I took them off like completely and was like walking about, going about like my day. Granted, my stability was not good, but it was still fine. It was fine. It was,
Not that it's any better now, but okay.
yeah. I mean, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, and the biggest thing was the Arnold was coming. And I had athletes competing at the Arnold, so I was like, dude, I gotta go. Like, there's no if and buts. Like, I gotta be there. Um, so I remember going and handling one of my athletes during one of the meets, and I got through squats. I was wrapping his knees. We got the bench, and like by that time, my leg had it like swelled up to like the size of like a melon. Like it was huge. My right leg. And I was like, "Oh, just probably from walking like 20,000 steps a day, like I'll be okay." And then it just like I went to the night show and I'm sitting there and like it just got worse and worse and worse. And I went to the hospital the next day and I remember they drained like over 30 cc's out of my knee.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, it was disgusting. It was also probably like the second worst pain of my life
Yeah, no shit.
because they use lidocaine to try to numb that stuff and it doesn't do anything. So they just drained it and then are like, "Yeah, you're getting surgery tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay." And this just led to like them doing one surgery and then after that one, so that was the second one, they just wash your knee out, put you on antibiotics, send you on your way. The infection didn't go away, so the third surgery came. Um, and the third surgery was because the anchors didn't hold in my right leg, so they had to fix it. So their expectation was the infection would clear and they fix it. So they went in to
Okay.
try to fix it, didn't I mean, I guess it got fixed, but like, yeah, the infection still seems to be there. Like, we're going to keep you on antibiotics. Okay. So that's the third one. You go to the fourth one. I was actually supposed to film a podcast with Dave at Elite that day. And I texted him, like, dude, look, my leg is like killing me. And this was after like 4 or 5 weeks, 5, 6 weeks maybe of that last third surgery. So I was training and this whole time, like I was under a barbell, like box squatting with SSB, like training like nothing happened. I was pulling off blocks, like doing what I could to get back to like my compound movements.
Hmm.
Um, And then I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. Like I'm back in the hospital. And the fourth surgery, they brought two new surgeons in. One guy was like really um well educated in bodybuilding. So he just was like, hey, like I understand like your issue. Like I understand you as a competitor. Like what he pretty much did, he went in and cut my entire scar off the front of my right leg because he was just like, this is so much scar tissue and plus this doesn't look good. So they just cut it off, and then I woke up the next day, and my actual like kneecap was like open. They just left my leg open, and then they put a bunch of tubes in there, and I was just sucking fluid out and pumping like a distilled bleach in there like nonstop, and left me in the hospital for I think it was like a little over close to 2 weeks.
Shut the fuck up. Just open me.
Yeah.
That's
So like I
disgusting.
and it
Really
was
cool, but also disgusting.
well, it was kind of scary because like the fourth surgery, it was bad. Like my leg was so bad. They're like, well, the number one goal is to save your life. Number two thing is to save your leg, and the third thing is everything else. And I was just like, all right, like I'm 23, like I don't want to wake up without my leg. You know what I mean? Like that's gonna be devastating. So I was just happy I woke up and had my leg at that point, and
Yeah, it's
you
good.
know, I was like, cool, like we'll be all right.
We got the legs. Sick.
So yeah, like
So, okay, so sorry to interrupt. So at this point, like, still, you're like, all right, well, I'll just come back from this, no problem.
yeah, I was like, all right, this will pass. Like it's just a time, just
Interesting.
yeah. Like I just look at it as like this is a time in my life like that will be just like a flash when it's all said and done. Um, and I just stayed positive and like I had a lot of people praying for me. Like anyone who knows me knows like I'm pretty big in my faith. So definitely was like very blessed to be able to, recover from that and had a lot of people on my side and rooting for me. So I just prayed about it and it worked out.
So when did the fifth one come into play? Because that was the fourth.
Yeah, so after the fourth, it was just immediately a fifth. So they just kept me in the hospital and they're like, we're going to go back in again and just make sure there's no like fragments or pieces of your hardware still like lingering we missed. So they went in, looked around my knee, pretty much just was like, okay, there's nothing in there. We got everything out. Now this is like where I luckily like kind of saved myself here. So the surgeons were like, you don't need any other antibiotics besides oral antibiotics, and you'll be good to go. You go home, your leg's good. We'll see you in 6 weeks. I said, okay, cool. Well, another infectious disease doctor came in who I'd never spoken to, and she looked at my blood work, and she was just like, yeah, you're going home with a PIC line, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Like that was not discussed. And she's like, yeah, because look at your blood work here. There's your white blood cell counts elevated, and this is off, based off the um based off pretty much the cultures we took from your knee. And I was like, the cultures you took weren't from my knee. It was from my connective tissue, like in like my like near like my vas lateralis. Um, and I was like, I was awake when they did that. They just put the sample in wrong. And we argued literally for like an hour straight about this in the hospital. And I'm like, no, look, I'm like, I read blood work all the time. And I was awake when this was done. So I'm telling you, I don't need a PIC line because this infection will clear off just oral antibiotics. I don't need a PIC line for this because it's not in the joint capsule or in the bone. So it was annoying because at this time it's just I was already just over it and she was just trying to argue and be like, well, you're not going to come back and be like what you were, you know, if you're not
Oh, so
listening to me.
she tried to appeal to that.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay. I was like, well, I'm going to go home. I was like, give me the prescription for the 6 weeks of antibiotics, the orals, and I'll come back and see you when you want me to. She said, okay. Gave me a 6 week cycle of doxycycline and took that, got done, and came in, saw her, pulled my labs, blood work was perfect, and she's like, you were right, I was wrong. I read the blood work wrong.
What would have been the forgive me because I'm not like super educated on antibiotics to this degree,
Hmm.
but what would have been the drawback of the PIC line? Like obviously it would have been inconvenient, but
Yeah, so it just there's a couple of different things. One, like I was already battling like my gut health at that point. Like,
Yeah,
it
for
was
sure.
already in a terrible spot. Like, I mean, I could not eat 6 ounces of chicken with, like, 180 grams of rice in under an
Oh,
hour.
gee.
Like, I was sitting there just, like,
Oh,
forcing.
oh my God.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
I mean, I was doing everything I could for gut health at that point, and just was not helping. And this is also, I think, what tied into my physique getting very soft, because I was still trained very hard, my food wasn't high, but my body's not able to utilize any of the nutrients I'm putting in it at this point. So I'm like, well, everything's just getting wasted. I'm not growing. Like, this is, I'm just trying to maintain at this point. I felt like, um, and at the pick line, when they put it in, it just runs up your arm and it goes like directly to like where your heart is,
Mhm.
essentially. So one, there's another area for infection to enter your body because you have an open tube in your arm.
Right. Yep.
And then the doctor was like, yeah, well, you can't lift anything over like 15 pounds. Like, a milk
Hmm.
carton's like pushing it. Like, I don't want you picking up this or that. Like, you can't really do anything for 6 weeks. And I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm like, I'm going to the gym to train.
Hmm.
And like, I mean, this sounds dumb, but like in my mind, I was more worried about not being able to train than anything,
It
than
doesn't,
having this in my
it
arm.
doesn't sound dumb. That doesn't sound dumb at all. I'm listening to this. And I'm like, I would have done the same fucking thing.
Yeah, just because it was such like a I trust in my own opinion and like my own thoughts and like my own data that I had present over like
Mm,
what they're telling me, and I get it from like their perspective. They were in a really bad spot, like, because they messed up. You know what I mean? Like, you
yeah.
have a 23-year-old who's 100% healthy, and he's going through all this, which it should have been a one and done surgery. So
And is it okay? So did you like go through litigation or anything like that? Or was it just like, just get me home, get me out of this shit? I'm done.
yeah, I was ready to go home. I was over it. I was like, dude, like, I just don't want to like deal with these people anymore. I don't want to be in the hospital. And it was
Hmm.
so crazy. Like, I took so many MRIs throughout that whole process that like the people at the hospital knew me by name. They're like, oh, hey, what's up, Jaden? Like, back to get
Oh
another
my,
MRI.
oh my God.
But what was cool
So
though with the MRIs though, I was able to confirm that like my protocols I was doing, my training and everything was working because my tendon kept getting noticeably thicker and thicker and thicker.
that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you go through the surgeries, you start the rehab, you start to get back under a barbell. There's got to be some fear. There's got to be some trepidations. Like, how do you mentally approach wanting to train as hard as you can while also managing the fact that you are a human being?
Uh, Honestly, a lot of it. I mean, Dave would like tell me like to stop a lot of the time. And he'd be like, "Dude, pull back," like, because I would just go, and I wouldn't even think like I blew my quads off or anything. It just was never a thought. All I thought in my head was, when I first blew my quads off in the beginning of the year, I was like, all right, I'm doing nationals at the end of the year. That was like the first thing in my head, and I just started training. And then all the setbacks happened. I'm like, okay, well, I was like, well, we're like looking at like June, July. I'm finally in the gym. So I was like, okay, well, what's reasonable? And I was like, well, maybe like USA's or something like that in the following year. So I kind of just started setting like tentative dates, even though that kind of changed as time went on. It still
Hmm.
gave me something to train for. And the biggest thing with like an injury like that, strength comes back super quick. Like, so I was back full training like July, and I was pulling Della PRs by October, like all time PRs, like over 700.
Do you have any lingering like compensation issues from the knee injuries now, or like you like reins are off, you're good, no issues?
There's no issues. The only thing that I did notice at first was like I was really focusing on like power output because like I really had to kind of dial that in and be like, am I putting the same amount of force through the floor through both legs? And at
Mm,
first it
right.
wasn't bad. It was like the left leg would just like wham and the right leg would just like 60%.
Hmm.
And I remember I couldn't even do 10 pounds on a leg extension. Like, I would just my legs would just tremble. And
Holy shit.
I was like, okay, like this is bad. I'm like, there's got to be a way to speed this up. It's like it's
Hmm.
not like a strength thing, it's just like a neuromuscular thing where I'm not able to have that same connection. So people will do, they'll get TENS units, deep tissue therapy done. But what really kind of just like slingshotted me was I started working with my buddy Chris Williams, who's now based out of Austin, Texas. And he has the New X machine. And what it does, it's almost like a TENS unit, but it's better. It's similar to like a newbie fit that
Yep.
Brad Rowe was training like Mike Tyson on when he came back into this fight. And what it does is makes your body fight through the eccentric and the concentric, and then he just kind of anchors it to you where it makes your brain like realize, hey, this muscle works. It's firing fine, and it has like more capacity to fire harder than what it is. So he would run me through pretty much like a body weight session with one of those on, and then he would have a electric magnetic Graston tool also, so he would just get around the fascia that was like not in a good place and break all that up. And I mean, man, I would get done and it would like the next day, like my quads would be like doubled in size because there's so much tissue that was just stuck and like not wanting to work how it needed to, that he really got to open up. And then my
It's
training
really
would just
interesting.
be next level the next couple months. So I tried to see him as much as I could, and that really helped. And then on top of that, it was just finding movements that I struggle with and getting comfortable in those ranges of motion. So um, someone who actually did help a lot with that was Seth Albersworth. So um, me and him talked about that, like, hey, like, what is something that would be like scary for you to do that would be tough? So let's say um, like a plat squat, right? On like a
Hmm.
hack squat machine. Those look crazy sketchy to be doing, especially someone like myself. So I would get on those, and we got to the point where I could progress more and more and more on them and add weight. And I still do those now, where crazy amount of forward knee travel, and I just lean into that. And I tell anyone, once you're comfortable and you get used to making that kind of progression, 100% load those areas that you feel intimidated by or you're scared about going into. Like, really train those because that will make you a 10 time better athlete than what you were before.
I love that because a lot of the time, those movements that we fear are probably the ones that are going to move us forward the most. I remember back when I first tore my right quad, like just muscle belly tear,
Mhm.
I was like, I want a sissy squat. I think if I can load my quads in that fully lengthened position in a sissy squat, I'll probably get my function back a lot faster. So I
Yeah.
started super assisted, like in like a glute ham raise. So I'd use the handles of the glute ham raise or like a dip bar, and I
Yeah.
would use those to like support my body weight and just go through the motions.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, as soon as I could do body weight sissy squats, oh, knee pain's a little bit less.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, for someone who's been through as many injuries as Seth, that's super insightful. I'm wondering if during this whole process of rehab and stuff, like I know for me, being removed from training the way I wanted to train kind of had me question my identity. Because if you had asked me prior to my string of injuries, so we're talking like 2016, 2017,
Hmm.
who are you? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm a power lifter. That I no longer identify as a power lifter. I no longer identify even as a strength athlete. There's
Yeah.
so many other things that come first
Mhm.
because training is just something that I do now.
Yeah.
What was that process for you? Like, did your identity shift? Did it get challenged? Did it get more fortified through that?
Honestly, like for me, I never felt like it didn't really cross my mind because like I see like individuals who identify as a powerlifter, they don't know anything else outside of that, or they
Hmm.
identify as a bodybuilder, they don't know anything else outside of that.
Right.
And I just could imagine me looking in the mirror and be like, who is Jaden? Who am I? No, like I know who I am. Like there's a ton of things about me that I love. There's things in life that I love that don't involve anything related to fitness. Like, like I love my family, love my friends, I love God. I like doing a ton of things that are outside of the sport. And I just looked at that as like, hey, like this is who I am. This is what made me. These are my core values. These are my foundations that I always resort back to. And then I was like, I've been very blessed to be very good at, you know, bodybuilding, powerlifting. You know, I want to get back to those and be better. But also, too, I'm very thankful to be a coach and have athletes that seek advice from me. So even when I was injured and like trying to go through this process, I was still, you know, checking in on all my athletes, updating their plans, like
Yeah.
being present, you know, making sure I was still doing all that. And, you know, even any athlete who goes, let's say, playing through years and years of a sport, let's say football, when guys
Mhm.
retire from football or they get done, they have a hard time finding what they like to do. Um, and like outside of lifting and like hobbies that I do, I don't do a ton of stuff. Like I listen to a lot of music. I like going to concerts and like a lot of stuff I couldn't do because I was in the house, like bedridden. So, um, you know, I just would try to learn new skills. I was like, this is a vital time for me to learn new skills. So I would find things I wasn't very good at, and then I would just work on them every single day. I was like, by the time I get done, and like by the time I'm back training, I should be a lot smarter. I should be a better version of me. I should be a better coach. I should be able to help more people. I should be more in tune with my body and be able to do the things I did way better.
Dude, I fucking love that. And you're speaking and I'm like, this kid is like, I say kid because I'm like 12 years older than you.
Yeah,
But there is no way at your age I would have had that much fortitude in my mental state to know who I am, what I stand for. So the question that popped into my mind as you're speaking is like, how did you get to that point? Like, what in your life taught you so strongly who you are?
I think honestly, going back to like looking at a lot of it, I spent a lot of time with my great grandparents growing up, so like they had a
Hmm.
huge impact on me, and they taught me a lot of core values, and they're very traditional. So they just taught me how to work really hard, like, you know, always, you know, stand strong what you believe in, and, you know, just how to be a man. And those were things that, you know, I always valued and always stuck with me. So like when you're getting with, I believe when you're always getting wisdom from like older generations every single day from like day one all the way up until you get older, that it can be very impactful. So I was very thankful to have some individuals in my life that just had a ton of wisdom to share with me and knowledge and how to think different. So um, like for example, my uncle, when I got to be like around like, you know, 12 years old, 11 years old, like I remember like I was reading like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was reading like a bunch of different books that had a ton
What?
of yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
continue.
Like how the book How to Win Friends and how to influence people, like just being able to understand and grasp different perspective of life, and that just has always carried with me.
Dude, I'm just like, I'm thinking about the massive contrast between our personalities. Because, listen, probably until I'll be 37 this year. So, probably until I was like 32, 33, when I had like a bit of like a huge eye opening experience in my life, bro, I was so fucking stubborn. Like, you could not tell me that I wasn't right about anything.
Yeah.
And that hampered me big time in my progression. And it's why I wasn't still able to compete after 2016, because I was just running my head into a wall, not listening to people. And I think having the audience hear about like just being open to alternate viewpoints, and you said it really well, like just thinking differently, like different ways to process information. You don't have to adopt those thoughts, right? You can be open to receiving them. You
Yeah.
don't have to take them in and adopt them, but just being exposed to them, listening to them, thinking critically about them, that's going to set and move you forward. It's really incredible to me that you learn that at such a young age.
No, I
I
appreciate
fucking
it.
love it.
Yeah.
Um, so this year you're prepping for North Americans again.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
assuming there's going to be a powerlifting meet somewhere right after that, within the next few months after that, with your rebound.
yeah, that's
What's
the
kind of the plan now?
so right now the plan is just to do North Americans and like that's the only show. I believe, you know, as long as I come in better than Jaden in 2021, that, I'll win and that I'll be very hard to beat. Of course, anyone could show up and it's out of my control, but I believe I'll get my pro card and accomplish that this time. And then from there, I'll get feedback from, Tyler Mania, Steve Weinberger, all those guys, and see what I should do from there. But there's not really any 212 pro shows that are close after that besides like the UK pro. So I mean, if they're like, hey, like go do that show, then I would consider it. But honestly, in my personal opinion, from like where I'm at, I think taking time off and just growing from then to like middle of next year or early next year would be best because my body will just slingshot and grow like it did this past year. And my goal is like I want to be like a great bodybuilder. Like I want to win. Like I want to be at the top. So um, I want to make sure I'm doing the necessary things in the off season to do that. But for powerlifting, like I definitely want to do a meet. It's so in terms of like risk and reward. I look at it from both ends. Bodybuilding, that's what I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. Besides play in the NFL, so I was like,
Hmm.
okay, like it's here now. Like it's this is like where I wanted to be. Like the opportunity is presenting itself, and I'm getting close to like my goal. So I need to be able to really dial things in. And then I'm like, well, it just by default I got good at powerlifting just from training and just enjoying training intense and lifting heavy. But I'm at like all time strength levels now, and I'm like I could walk on the platform any day and like put up a top three all time total in my weight class. So it's like, man, like I want to do that, and then it's like I also like kind of want to go back and try to break the all time world record again that I blew my quads off trying to get.
It's honestly, I'm like, when you're talking about risk reward, that's the game that I'm playing right now with myself because the risk of continuing to pursue like powerlifting is way higher than trying to pursue bodybuilding.
Oh yeah,
And I'm
it's
approaching this, bro. I'm approaching this from a perspective like I'm a fucking ass bodybuilder. Like I am not good at bodybuilding, but I was mediocre at powerlifting. At one time, I was one of the best in the world. Um, I'm just not that anymore because the sport has exploded. But I know that you'll make the best decision for yourself. And I want to kind of transition the conversation away from Jaden the athlete, more towards Jaden as the coach. But the reason I wanted to start the conversation of Jaden as the athlete is because I think a lot of people forget that the lessons we learn as athletes are the ones that allow us to be excellent as coaches. And even just hearing you speak about your mentality with the comeback from the quad tears, you know, the way you look at identity, the way you look at purpose, the way you approached, well, if I can't train, I want to be a better person. I think that speaks to the quality of coach that you are now and are going to be because it's something that you're very, very passionate about. Um, can you speak a little bit to like when you started coaching? Like, cause has it been just, oh, well, I'm just going to help people and then kind of determine like it developed into a business or, how did that come about?
yeah. So in 2019 when I was at Westside, that's when people started reaching out to me for coaching. So
Hmm.
I started like building my social media, started getting better, and I was young. When I was there, I was like the youngest person probably by like 10 years probably. So I was hitting like all these big numbers, and people were like, man, like who's this guy? And then they just started reaching out to me, asking me for coaching. Well, I mean, only at the time, the most in depth thing I could give them was like conjugate, and then it was just kind of like basic linear periodization. That's kind of was just like the extent of like what I could give these people, and then how not to eat like an idiot. But
Yeah. Which is really hard for some people.
yeah, so that's all I could really give them. And at the time, it was just uh, I was just like coaching a few people, and then I started taking some more people here and there, and then I was trying to just balance like undergrad at the time, so I wasn't looking at it from like a real business perspective because I was still bouncing. So like I used to bounce at clubs like all the time. Like, that was
As
like,
we all did.
yeah. So I would just do that and go to class and not really think about much else. And I was just like, okay, cool. Like maybe this will go to something. If I want to get involved in coaching. Granted, I was going to school to be a strength conditioning coach, and that was kind of like my sought out plan at first. But Long story short, once I got to, I'd say like towards the end of undergrad, probably like the last like 2 years, so it's probably like 2020, 2021, around there. Um,
Mhm.
I started to like consider it like more and more and more, and like understand like how I can continue to have this grow. Just because it just became like an influx of people just wanting coaching, and I was like, okay, well, I'm learning a lot more. Like I'm getting, more educated. I understand things a lot more now, just from trial and error myself, and then just learning. So I was like, okay, well, let's just keep it rolling, and then from there, just continue to grow like it is now. And now since then, like I feel like I'm able to provide like obviously like a very top tier service compared to what I used to be able to.
100%. And I mean, it's very rare that as the owner of a company, you're bringing on a coach to a team, that coach is coming with as much experience as you do. So like for me, it makes my job super easy as a mentor, but it also allows you to ask better questions of me, right? Because you're able to know exactly where you fall short. Um, and I think the ceiling for you as a coach is you're not there's no ceiling as a coach. The other thing I want to point out is like you started your business simply by just doing something that you're super passionate about. And I think
Yeah.
that's where people miss. It's like some people are like, okay, if I build it, they will come. It's like, not really.
Yeah.
You did what you were doing, so they came, and then you're like, okay, I should probably build something.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like, you see a lot of athletes who are like very, very talented, right?
Mhm.
But they aren't able to actually apply their own knowledge or how to get there to someone to help them be able to grow and be better. Like I think as a coach, like being able to take an athlete and make them better than you and like surpass everything you've done is like
Yep.
it's pretty cool. And like I've finally done that. I have a couple guys who are up there ahead of me now. So it's like to look at that is neat, and then just to be able to be like, okay, cool, like not only have I done it, like I know like how it works and like what works for me, then also like how to change things to work for someone else to also obtain the same kind of level.
And I think you learn something very specific about humans when you yourself have been through trials.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing that a client could come to you with now where you would be like, "Oh man, I don't know how to talk to you about this,"
Yeah.
because you've been through something so traumatic. Um, within your business now, like who are the types of people that you love working with?
I say now my number one thing is just working with people who are just able to work hard and follow a plan and execute. It doesn't have to, you don't got to be the strongest. You don't have to be, the best at what you do, whatever the case may be. Like if you literally just show up and follow the plan and check in and do what I ask and give great effort, that's all I ask for. And I think any coach who, has been able to build like any kind of success within their business or been able to actually like learn a lot about clientele or taking the time to, they'll all probably give you a very similar answer.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, it's so funny because I just want to coach people who want to be coached,
Yeah.
right? I want to coach people who have a passion for being better than they were before. And I think by showcasing that we are still pursuing that for ourselves,
Yeah.
you're going to get the people that you want. Um, I want to talk a little bit about social media and finding your voice because that was really a big part of the conversation you and I had at the Arnold. It was like, you had this massive social media following, but you were almost struggling to acquire clients or monetize that audience in terms of your coaching because you truly didn't showcase how much knowledge you had to help people.
Yeah.
Maybe speak to a little bit like, and the reason I'm asking you to speak on this is because I think it's going to humanize the process for a lot of people that even though you have a lot of experience, even though you have a lot of social media following, you still do deal with the same insecurities, the same fears that everyone else does around speaking on camera, sharing your knowledge. Like, what were some of the things maybe that prevented you from doing that you're addressing now?
I'd say like the number one thing for me was just I did not want to sound like a know-it-all. And
Oh,
as like simple and straightforward as that sounds, that's literally it. Just because I know I have a lot of knowledge, and I know I can help a lot of people, and I enjoy doing that obviously, but I don't want to get on camera and be like, and have people be like, this guy thinks he knows it all, or he thinks he knows this or that. And I'm like, when I sat back and really thought about that, I'm like, one, I'm not someone to care what other people think. And then I was like,
mhm.
how about I just get out of my own head and just put the content out? And then
Yep.
that literally was it. That's how simple as it was. And then I just put out the
That's
content.
interesting. I it's interesting that you would say, "I was worried about being a know-it-all," because if anyone has ever criticized me, it's that they think that I have this, like, holier than thou kind of, uh, like, attitude, or that I'm very cocky, when it's actually the opposite. I'm very open to new viewpoints and thinking differently, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that comes to mind when you were talking is, like, people are gonna find a way to hate you no matter what.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And you're never going to number 1, you're never going to appeal to everyone, nor should that be your goal.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as bad publicity, unless you end up on Goob's channel.
Yeah.
That's probably bad publicity.
Yeah.
But I am personally very happy to see you sharing more of your knowledge, especially, with the X's and O's of training, because you're someone who, honestly, when we were talking, like, when I was at Elite last, and we were talking about your training split and how you're balancing bodybuilding goals with still doing the compound lifts and doing them heavily. It's something that I'm personally dealing with, like, how much of the compound lifts can I actually do and still move the needle? And it was really humbling to learn for myself that the answer is not much.
Yeah.
I can't,
Nah.
I can't do
Yeah.
much of the competition lifts. Um, can you talk a little bit about, like, what that training split looks like for you? Because all people see online is, yo, Jaden pulled 765 last week, and he's 13 weeks out from a bodybuilding show. What the
Yeah.
fuck?
Yeah. So honestly, with my training, I had the goal of pulling 800 pounds like in this off season for powerlifting, or just in my
Mhm.
training. I was like, okay, cool. I want to pull 800. Get my squat up around 800 again, and then bench, hopefully around five. I was like, those would be like attainable goals, and I can do that.
Pretty not bad numbers, yeah.
Because like, I could do that, before my prep probably starts. Well,
You realize how fucking ridiculous that sentence was? Oh yeah, I'll just, squat and deadlift around 8, pull 5, and it'll be okay. Total 2,100, whatever.
yeah. Well, then I think about people like John Hack. I'm like, well, then John would be going like, 8, 6, 9. So
Yeah, but John looks not like a bodybuilder,
that's
So
true. Yeah.
there's that. So how do you structure your training in a way where you can still push those main lifts, but also still allocate enough fatigue management to push hypertrophy work?
So what I do, and this has worked great for me. Of course, some people need more frequency and they just need more time to that stimulus, and just getting used to that, and
For
getting
sure.
under that kind of load. So like for me, what I do, I'll have on Saturday I'll squat heavy or I'll deadlift heavy, one of the two.
Mhm.
So I'll usually pick a variation. Now I've changed things throughout this off season and a little bit in this prep so far. No, a little bit different than what I normally do. Sometimes I wanted to focus on my squat. I'd run a 3 to 4 week wave of a variation. Let's say we have cambered bar plus 120 pounds in chain, and then I would run a 3 to 4 week wave. So like first week you're just kind of getting you know, adapted to the variation. And then, I'd progress up over just 3 to 4 weeks and then maybe throwing a deload in there. And then I'd hit like a top week of that wave and then rotate in something new. Well, what I've done is that I'll throw in that variation. So like a new variation, and then I'll kind of just run just to focus a little bit more on bodybuilding here, just like two top sets and one back down set. And then I get rid of that variation and put a new one in the following week. That's not going to be crazy difficult. And people will be like, "Well, that's you're constantly changing it. It's kind of like conjugate, but you're not doing true max effort." But I'm like, what I'm trying to get here is I'm trying to continuously still build strength. I'm still
Mhm.
tracking these PRs the same as I would in general. And
Mhm.
then on top of that, it's also like limiting. It's like eliminating the risk of potential injury versus me coming in squatting like straight weight 800 pounds or plus something like that,
Yeah, for sure.
building up to that week in week out. So I'll do that. I'll hit a heavy squat. So like I did like one week I did 685 plus 120 pounds in band on a straight bar, and then I did 600 for a set of five with 200 pounds in chains. So those are good numbers that equated to like around, those are PRs. So like those were like stronger than when I was squatting like around 800 in sleeves. I couldn't even do that. So I was like, okay, cool. Like we're rolling. Like I'm in a better spot than I was before. I'm happy. Then for my
Mhm.
deadlift, what I would do is the biggest thing the first few weeks when I came back out of my last rebound, I was pulling every week for like a month. One, because the weights weren't super heavy, and I just need to get used to pulling again, getting used to my leverage, and just being comfortable deadlifting. That was it. And I know I can't handle deadlifting more than once a week, especially trying to pull heavy. So what I'll do is I'll still do the same thing kind of with how I do with squat. I'll pull pretty much like a top set, work up to that, hit like two back down sets if needed, and then rotate in a new variation. Now, I think for most people, they would benefit more from picking a variation and sticking with it for an extended amount of time to track
Mhm.
progression directly.
Right.
And as I get deeper into prep, that's something I'll lean more towards just to be able to do that. And then plus to just keep myself from any kind of potential injury. But as my strength was climbing, like I was pulling numbers and hitting the weights I wanted to on variations that I knew would give me good carryover. And then when I got to straight weight, I pulled 765. I'm like, okay, perfect. Like I did exactly what I wanted to do. And I was like, on the low end, 765 is my goal for sure. Make sure that can happen and then go from there. So I pulled that. And then like now my plan is, okay, cool. Pulled that sumo. I'm not going to be able to build much more at this time. Let's go start and put in a new variation, build there, something like conventional deadlift or barbell RDLs, keep progressing those over a course of like a 4 or 6 week span.
And when you say 4 to 6 week span for these blocks, we're talking every other week. So it's actually closer to 8 weeks.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
that's yes. In this case, yes. Now sometimes like for squat, I will just push my deadlift as like a secondary movement essentially, and just come
Mm.
in and squat for like 4 weeks sometimes straight, and
So
then
that secondary movement's probably just like a pause deadlift or something like super low intensity.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or I'll pull up like a deficit at like 70, 75%, something that's not super hard,
Mhm.
but still is fixing a weak point is still is challenging. But yeah, sometimes those will turn into being like 6 to 8 week or 8 to 12 week spans to be able to get through that progression. But now it's kind of like, okay, like how am I recovering and what can I handle? Because what I do in my split now, I still have 2 leg days a week, and that's what I've done since I tore my quads. And granted, my legs
Mhm.
have been a strong point, but I'm like, I want to be able to make sure everything's feeling how it needs to feel. Make sure because the biggest thing was like my right VMO was behind my left one. Um, and when I pose and
Yeah.
stuff, no one they'd be like, "Oh, I can't tell," but like I can tell. So
No, you can tell your legs, like when you, especially in the front poses,
mhm,
up top, like adductor, lateral quad, like up top, super thick. But
yeah,
then around the knee, you just, that's where the tears were,
yeah,
right? So you got to build that up a lot more.
yeah. So it's like been like kind of like trying to build that area up. And like when I go back and look like old pictures, like I was still always like pretty small around that area. It wasn't
Okay.
like it went like way downhill. It's just like my right
Mhm.
one, there's still like a little bit of like there's no anchor. So like, there's an anchor in my left one, so my left one like pops way more. Just I think how
Oh,
it's like literally closer to my kneecap, and my right one there's not. So like there's like a small like area where my right one's atrophied from over that time. So like it's gotten better, and like I just find movements that are specific to engage it more. So essentially, what I'll do is I'll pull and squat on Saturday. Then I have another, and that's a quad focus day with calves, and then I put in my glute hamstring focus day, like middle of the week on a Wednesday usually.
okay. Um, in doing so, like with all this, I'm sure there's going to come a time, maybe 6 weeks out, where you're like, okay, let's shut down these barbell movements. Like when are you planning on pulling them out,
I'll keep them
if ever?
in. I'll keep them in up to 2 weeks out. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
But it'll be like for me, I like this is one of the things I really thought about this prep. I was like, what made me be able to come in how I did in 2021, aside from the diet and the peaking protocol and all those factors, of course. What did I do that
Mhm.
worked so well? So I went back and I just looked. I was doing things like overhead barbell press. Like I literally would run that all the way up through prep for the most of prep. I was doing like Bradford press. I was doing dumbbell split squats. I was doing um, things that just were more. I did take out like barbell bench press, um, but I was doing things that really helped keep a lot of density and thickness. Like I was doing like heel elevated SSB squat. I mean, it wasn't a lot of weight. It was like 365 to 405, but I'm like I was still like really focusing on my quads, like doing things that were challenging, that were variations, but I wasn't getting under tons and tons of weight.
I like that. Dude, I really appreciated this. Let's shift the conversation a little bit more to some silliness because I like to finish off these
Yeah.
conversations with silliness. First question: when are you going to squat to depth?
Did people literally will ask me that. Like they'll just comment like that looks high, that looks high, that looks high. I'm like, dude, this is the same depth I squat 830 to. Like I got 3 white lights in my last meet. Like if you have any big
I'm I just I just needed to get you riled up a little bit. Like I just needed to get a little bit of fire out of you.
people will comment on my stuff and say something every now and then. I'm like, look, like I got people calling my depth. I'll look at like someone in the gym like call my depth on these. And I'm not even training for a meet either. Like I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bodybuilding essentially, and people still want to throw like hate at me. I'm like,
I
okay.
just think it's fucking hilarious. Um, okay, you're going for a top set. What's in your headphones?
Oh, what lift?
Squat.
Oh, kill switch engage into part ache.
Okay. Deadlift.
Um, Probably like Lil Jon, East Side Boys.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
What about bench press?
it'll be like Big Pun, Fat Joe.
Honestly, that's not far off from like my rotation too. I
Yeah,
usually go like heavy metal for the squat, something more like trap hip hop for deadlift because I
yeah,
can't be too excited to deadlift.
yeah. Because
I
you'll
like to
forget
be a
all your
little more
cues.
relaxed. Yep. And then for bench press, it's usually like Nas or Biggie, something like I'm more vibing to.
Yeah,
Because again, I can't get excited to bench press because I have to think too much.
yeah.
That's so funny. Um, the last question I have for you: who have been the three most influential people in your life, whether it be training, as a man, as you mentioned, in your mindset? Like, who are the three most influential people that have led you to develop the mindset and training acumen that you have today?
I'd say like in life in general, I'd definitely be my great grandfather, my great grandmother, both have passed away. But I say those two people, and then I say third, honestly, would be my uncle. Um, the reason I say that is because he was a prime example of someone who went out and chased his dreams and gave everything he had, like his entire life, and still does. So um, it was inspiring for me. And then of course, like when I have business ideas or like I need to talk to him about something that's out of the norm of what like a normal human being would think, he like hears
Mm-hmm.
it out and he's able to be like, no, like what you're thinking is right. You think like the 1%, like keep doing what you're doing, and like he kind of just reassures like what I'm doing will work. So um,
I love that.
yeah, those are the three people.
Dude, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm very excited to have you as part of the team. Is there one piece of parting wisdom that you have for the audience?
Honestly, whatever you're doing out there, just keep doing it. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. It may not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, but everything will come together and you will persevere.
I love it. I love it. Jaden, thank you so much. I'll have links to where everyone can find you in the show notes. To everyone who's listening, thank you so much. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And we'll catch you on the next one.